Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm really excited today on our panel discussion on ReImagine the future of digital supply chain. We want this panel discussion to be interactive. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll be answering them through the panel discussion. And if we don't have time to answer all the questions, we'll personally follow up with you after this discussion. So today, what are we talking about? It's all about the future of digital supply chain. Joining our panel today is Ashok and Pradeep from Aurion Systems and Pete, thought leader in supply chain and CEO of the BlackRock Group. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Great, Michelle. Thanks. Glad to be here.
That's great. Yeah. Glad to see you all. And yes, this topic is very close to probably everyone at the moment in this unprecedented time. So let's start off with the panel discussion. So Pete, I'll start with yourself. What are the fundamental key differences between supply chain, operations, and then logistics?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, from my perspective, we really don't see a difference. There's a real blurring and interconnectedness of all of these components. They're really different ways to describe the same thing. I really like to go back to that fundamental definition of supply chain. And you think a chain with links that are forged together, where the weakest part of that is the weakest part of the chain, whichever link that is. And it's really how we view logistics, operations, supply chain, whether you're moving product or moving people or moving data or moving money. It's really a connectedness in the world that we live in today.
Yeah, that is so true. And Pete, what are your thoughts on the impact of the global crisis, well, of course, the pandemic, on the supply chain companies? How have they been impacted?
It's really been a nearly overnight shift in dynamic. Previously, supply chains were incrementally evolving, but many companies unfortunately saw them as a cost center, where they were just trying to squeeze out costs. And really all of the other metrics that you can measure the success of a supply chain were very secondary. And almost overnight, supply chains became the critical link in a company doing business, even companies that aren't traditionally product companies. And so we saw just a real shift to extreme flexibility, a real focus on resilience, because the world is ever changing every day. You know, we spoke before the panelists came on today about the fact that, you know, we thought a few months ago that the world was going to start moving back towards normal. And we don't see that in a lot of areas in the world today. And we don't anticipate a lot of those companies being able to return to what they would see as normal pre-pandemic operations, maybe ever. Yeah. And so that change is really catastrophic.
Yeah, and so that leads me to the next question of remote workforce. Like, how can you be effective in these uncertain times? You know, someone said, look, it's not really a remote workforce anymore, it's just a normal workforce. So how do you effectively manage that and be efficient?
Yeah, so for us, it's really about connectedness. At the BlackRock Group, we don't have any offices that any of our folks sit at, and no two of our people are together. And we have folks deployed in the United States. We have folks deployed across Asia, projects starting in South Africa and in Europe. And we really have to stay connected. And that's really what it's about. We use a lot of collaborative tools, and things like Smartsheet are, I think, the way that the business world will have to interact. We can't do things like email ourselves documents back and forth. That doesn't work in a connected world. And in a world that's also always on. That connectedness also has that kind of attribute, right? That we're very collaborative, we're very connected, and I get up early in the morning so I can spend some time with our friends in Singapore, and throughout the day with Europe, and then into the evening with our friends in Australia as well, because of the time zones, just because, again, it's all about connectedness and really using those collaborative tools.
Yeah, I feel for you because I have the same schedule, but just reversed. So that really leads into, and this is to all the panelists, the key challenges companies are facing. How are they achieving their business goals, and what are some of the best practices?
Yeah, so I'll jump in there that I really think it's just a tremendous time of challenge, but also a tremendous time of opportunity, right? So we have a shrinking and aging labor force, we have rising costs, we have very demanding customers, and in the midst of that, we have a global pandemic. And we're having to deal with all of those factors at the same time. And we live in a day and age of now. Everyone wants everything now. We're not used to, not only can you not have it now, but maybe there's a supply chain issue and you're not going to have it for a while. And that's just very, very difficult. So for me, it goes back to that same connectedness, innovative but simple solutions delivered with excellence that you can do over and over again.
Yeah, so true. Any other comments from the panelists?
Yeah, I think thanks, Michelle, for running this through so far. And thanks, Pete, for your very insightful comment. I would like to add a point which is very important is we have seen a lot of things changing across the supply chain, logistics sector, and the business as a whole, not just in Australia, New Zealand, globally. And the way the word itself says supply chain, they are so connected, regardless of which country it is changing, it will impact other countries as well, just because of the nature of connectedness of the business. Now, what is happening is there's a good news and bad news. Good news is fundamentals are still the same. You can still address those problems. Same way you have been dealing with all these years, you have been doing so. So there is a piece which you can still use. There's another element which is added on just because of the factors which Pete has just mentioned, which has led to a need of reimagining the way you want to do it. I'll give you a small example. We're talking about visibility. We're talking about remote workforce. What has not changed is need to be visible to each other. What has changed? How you do that.
Yeah.
Now, in the offices where we used to sit together next to each other, talk to each other, just sort of watch over the next desk, okay, who's doing what? That need is still there. What has changed is the visibility element of it, how to implement that visibility aspect. That's exactly where I think Pete pointed out towards. You have to have collaboration. You have to have visibility tools in place, and the tools which are very easy to use, the tools which are very easy to perceive. The tools are so intuitive in a form where it doesn't look very far from reality. Now, it begs the question, if it is so much clear that what to do, why it is not happening? So the reason why it is not happening is the element of reimagination of the whole thing. That's exactly where, and I don't blame leaders in supply chain, because the supply chain sector has been very busy all the time. Even before pandemic, now and after pandemic, it will always become very busy segment. It's very hard to step back and think about, okay, let's reimagine today. That doesn't happen. That's exactly the importance of these webinars, sending your teams into these kind of discussions, sending those teams to actually go give them an opportunity to step back from the thick of the things and say, okay, let me reimagine. Let me get one more idea in my life, which I can reimagine tomorrow, and start doing it. Which essentially, if I have to really name what I'm talking about, is a framework to basically reimagine the whole thing. So that's basically I wanted to add on what just Pete has mentioned. And if you have to take away anything from these kind of conversation, is to take one single idea which you can start doing tomorrow with your team without the fear of failing it, without the fear of risking anything, and just do it.
Yeah, exactly. And getting the teams on board, and having that real collaboration. So, Ashok, what are you seeing in the top trends and the top trends like across organizations? We're actually zoning in on supply chain functions. And also, as Pete mentioned, the changing and the wanting of the customer experience.
All right. So because we are doing a discussion within supply chain sector, I will give you a well-connected answer to that question. And that's a very important question. And the importance of that question get lost just because the answer is fragmented. So the expectations have never changed. So the three expectations broadly in a supply chain and logistic business is a successful supply chain and logistic business is firmly successful on three fundamental factors: service excellence, operational excellence, marketing excellence. Now, it sounds so simple. Take any element of it, it's a word in itself. Now, if I have to really sequence it, all three elements, they're equally important. But if I have to really, someone forces me to say, okay, which one need to pick first because I can do only one thing at a time. So take service excellence. Now, what has not changed is service excellence expectations still the same. What is changing is how you get there. You're not next to your colleague now, where you can talk about a default KPI or how quickly you can onboard a new 3PL customer tomorrow who is waiting for a contract to start for last 7 months. That's not happening anymore. There has to be a model which feeds into itself and gives results on its own. So that begs me another question. Even it is so connected as an answer, where is the disconnect? And the disconnect is very simple. The workforce during the pandemic has been so engaged in getting this whole ball running and ball rolling. They have, even though they're consciously very close to their customer, thinking that, okay, I'm replying 10 emails per hour or 10 emails per minute or 10 minutes. I'm doing so much for my customer. In the short term, yes, it looks good. On the longer term, you have lost a connection with your own customer itself. And the customer, who's customer for a person? For a CEO, the customer is the person he's getting paid for the running the contract supply chain. And for an analyst, who is the customer? The person he's feeding information to. Anyone who is basically doing face-to-face or remote-to-remote or Zoom meeting with that person is a customer for that person. Sometimes we call it internal customer, sometimes we call it external customers. Essentially, the idea is pandemic has enforced, knowingly, unknowingly, so many short-term strategies in the system that we are getting very, very almost lost the sight of. I'm not saying that across the board it's the same, but a big chunk of people have lost the sight of what is coming ahead of us in 1 week down the line, 1 month down the line, 6 months down the line. And to answer your question, what are the top trends? As I said, the requirement is never changed. How to achieve that has changed, not because of anything, it is required to change. So that's exactly where we have to be. So the change requirement within any supply chain and logistic business, earlier you had a luxury of implementing that in 5 months, 3 months, 6 months. Now it's in weeks or days. So what you have option left with you is either you can learn on your own and do it for next 6 months, keep trying something new, or get onto an expert right now. Have your free consultation done. Understand, okay, this is where my starting point is. Quickly get to your starting point, whatever it may be. Now, what are the biggest benefit of doing that? The quickly you get onto this journey, or get onto a starting point, basically, you essentially will be very closer to reality very quickly. And that itself, the starting point of it. Well begun is half done, basically.
Yeah.
So that's essentially my understanding. That might be a perspective. I would actually definitely invite audiences as well to contribute their thought process as well in the chat box if possible, because I would love to be challenged in terms of, I would love to see that I'm wrong, because I want this whole sector to work in a way that everything is not in weeks and months anymore. It is in days and hours now.
Exactly. And it goes back to Pete's comment. It's everyone wants it now.
Yes.
It's time. We're all very urgent and busy. And It can't be in a weeks or days even. So how does the quality and the risk management approach help to achieve those trends?
So the quality and the risk, I think pre-pandemic, you could have called them quality and risk. Now they are converted into threats now. So they were risk. You know how we evaluate risk. Anything which is converted into issue is impending, we have to deal with tomorrow. Now, what has happened during the pandemic thing, the layer of pandemic has made every risk into threat now. That's exactly why there's a need to reimagine the whole thing in a very faster and quicker manner, because you can live with risk for some time, but not the threats. Now, threat is the last stage of a risk. You can't go beyond them. You can't get worse than that. It's as simple as that. So the point has come where you're not facing any risk anymore. You're facing threats now. And some of the threats, God forbid, could be existential as well in the business. I have few of my customers. I spoke to them about what you are thinking about next strategic plan for next 7 months or 8 months. They said, we are still thinking. I spoke to them last week. They're closing the business, two of my customers. Not because of anything. It's just the timeliness of the action. So there are two things. Taking an action will benefit. And pre-pandemic, if you were not taking an action, it was not hurting you. Now, not taking an action is hurting you as threat. So doing versus not doing has a big gap now. If you don't do it, you are on an inclined plane basically. Either you're going up or you're going down. There is no straight line anymore.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and
I definitely. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pradeep.
And I definitely agree with my friend Ashok. Very beautifully articulated the risks, to the supply chain businesses. And now we are also talking about reimagining the future of supply chain, where we are talking about the digital age we are in, and the more and more adoption of a digitization that is happening to the businesses. It's not only basically comprised of the risks that we have in the current time, which supply chain has always been facing, but it's the another league of risks that got introduced just because things are going digital. So as Ashok has very clearly outlined that the supply chain is basically doing service excellence. They have to do the service excellence. They have to do market excellence. They have to be operationally excellence. So in all these areas, now we have opened up altogether different kind of risks. What happens, if our supply chain gets affected, gets impacted because the vendor's data have got hacked or theft? So, these are kind of risks that we have introduced again. Now, going and, stepping back and thinking about, okay, I want to do something about my risks that I have. It involves 360-degree holistic look around what you're going to do, what standards you're going to follow. So there are a lot of things that are required. So that's what, in addition to what Ashok is saying, it's very important in this time and age for the businesses to consider the holistic, decisioning model as to if we are going from point A to point B, what are the, risks that I'm gonna talking about? What are the threats that I'm gonna be having? So that threat perception is really important, and having a full control eye on those threats is very important in this time and age.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that is just critically important is that we have not lived in a linear world for a long time. We've lived in a logarithmic world where change and just the evolution of what society is doesn't go in a straight line. It goes in an upward curve. And I think until the pandemic, a lot of folks didn't necessarily see that impact their lives. But after the pandemic, we see that now. To Ashok's point about existential threats, is that the world changes very, very quickly. And now people see it. They see it every day. And they see it in the things that happen all around the globe and our connectedness. But I agree with you completely that the risks have become threats. But that's where we really try and counsel our customers to say, look, where you have a market threat versus something that's unique to your company, that's also an incredible opportunity because everyone else in the market faces the same threat. And that's a place where we can service our customers and they can service their customers if they're willing to adapt and change.
And that's really important. are organizations willing to adapt and change? But it's not about willing anymore. As Ashok said, it's a must. But for any change, the importance of change management drive operational efficiencies. How do you see that being taken up and implemented?
Yeah, so one of the things that we counsel our customers is that we really need to have a SaaS mindset. SaaS is not just a technology adoption strategy. SaaS is a way of thinking about things. I remember, I'm not too young in my career to remember about when we would do enterprise projects, right? These would be the really big ones that cost millions and tens of millions of dollars. The board would have to approve, and we're going to live with whatever that is in measurements of decades, because it's going to take that long to depreciate all of the assets that we just had to spend all that money on, right? That's an old way of thinking. There's very few things that I can think of that fit into that model. A SaaS mentality, and this is what I love so much about Smartsheets, and I'm a user. I'm not just an advocate. I use it in my daily business, and we counsel our customers about this, is that SaaS mindset says, what can I do today? What can I do as a bias to action to get, even if it's 90% of what I think I need, the reality probably is it's closer to 100%. And once I get going and I really can, get into it, as Ashok said, and get to starting on the journey, I'm probably going to learn pretty quickly that the things I thought I maybe needed, I really didn't get a lot of value from, right? Let's get going. Let's get to 90%. And then we'll have really good frame of reference in the solution. And as we're gathering new data to go, do I need to make adjustments? Sure. But this enterprise thought of, you had so many business decisions I saw for years that they kept going the same direction just because of the investment we already made 15 years ago and we felt like we had to. And I have no problem when we do some of these SaaS kind of mentalities to go, that worked 5 months ago, but that doesn't work today. And we need to throw the whole thing away and start with something completely different. And next week it'll be a completely different answer because that's what the market dictates for me. And so I think that part of change management and getting adoption, bias to action, and controlling it is important too, because there's such an emotional attachment for folks as we work through change management. We've actually brought in people with like psychology experience to go, let's help shepherd people through this, right?
And that's really interesting. I'm a change management advocate, and I live and breathe it. And a lot of the time in a change management or change leadership, it's one thing that I can see all the time is they're not involving the teams. They're not bringing the teams along the journey, and therefore the adoption is you can't just say, use this, take them on the journey and let them see what the change is going to be. Ashok, your views?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very important point, Michelle, you have pointed out, and Pete yourself. If I have to really connect these two thoughts and bring my thought perspective as well, is essentially any change, the biggest threat to change is basically not involving people across the board. Now, does it mean that people who are not able to involve peer teams in the discussions, they don't know that? No, it's not the case. I've noticed that most of them realize that it is required. But what is challenged in this whole situation is they don't know how to achieve that state. Mm. So when you start on a change, that's not the starting point of it. That's an end goal of it. And most of the people don't know the journey from A to B. How to even establish a team. That's exactly the tools, SaaS tools, they all come together, bring that visibility forward. There is no further question about what's happening where. It's happening in front of you. The quickest help you can do is buy a TV, set up in your office, have a data displaying on that. That's the first thing you can do tomorrow. Yeah. So that no one asks a question, where I'm red, where I'm green. That's so good news and the bad news. The first change you will notice by buying a TV for yourself and your team, a large size TV, of course, is converting bad news into good news. And the good news is anything which was outside your control will start coming into within your control. That's the first step towards any change. Second thing is you can't take anymore the lag behind the data for the actions which has been happened or deliveries which have been made last 1 week get reported to you on your desk next Monday. That lag has to go out to nil now. Your resolution on data should be as close to 1 minute. So you can't be looking at data which shows a reality of 1 week back, and you're planning to take some actions on it, filtered with your own experience, saying that, okay, this is what I think, this is what data says, and merge together and take an action. Probably that resolution, that luxury has gone out of the window the day the pandemic started.
Exactly.
So probably that's my thought added on to what Pete said and what Michelle, the very important points. It's just a matter of how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's real-time data. We can't have data even a day old because we can't make informed decisions. Organizations can't make informed decisions if they've got old data, because as the world and as organizations change, it needs to be integrated with all of your systems and real time. So, Pradeep, you've been quiet. So we're all living in a virtual world. What is the importance of data and information security in the supply chain? And what is the environment to avoid cyber attacks? Because as more and more organizations are going cloud, SaaS, one thing that's always been mentioned to me is the security. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as we know that we are embarking on the digital age, and the adoption has been phenomenal in the past few years, couple of years. If you see, SaaS has been a game changer for a lot of organizations and businesses, and has been fitting in very well in the strategy that they have. In terms of their growth plans, in terms of their cost transformation initiatives, in terms of their operational excellence. So, organizations and businesses are moving at a very fast rate, at a very rapid rate. At the same time, what is happening is cyber threats and cyber attacks have increased at the same pace. I would rather say much more than that. They are much more ahead in the game. And I think quite recently, we all have been facing one sort of attack, that we are getting SMSs and we are getting sort of messages from, your deliveries on the way. Just send us some details and we will pass on the delivery to you. A lot of, such kind of attacks are underway. Now we are also talking about the supply chain, industry and logistics as well. This whole industry, as we know of, it's segmented. Now there are too many players who are, having a very vital role to be playing across the journey, right from the product gets manufactured to get consumed. So there are a lot of stages, a lot of steps, a lot of hands involved. And now we are also talking about a lot of hands, which means a lot of people. So we are also talking about Internet of People, just like how we talk about Internet of Things. We are talking about Internet of People. Everybody is so connected, so well connected, collaborating, everything real time. That has actually exposed us to a lot of risks, because now we are also talking about which supplier is giving what material, which customer is buying what kind of products from us. So these are all the intels that are at very high risk, because the moment if somebody enters into the ecosystem, they could do anything for you. It can disrupt your whole supply chain. So it can make or break the economy, right? So it has the threat of that level that it could actually impact the country's economy. So now what we are talking about is it might be a small threat, just changing the details of one supplier in a system. But the result of that ripple effect is that the delivery won't happen, and there might be a lag of another few months or days or whatever it is to time to recover from that sort of threat. Now it gets very important to understand that there is an essential need of basically relying on certain standards in supply chain industry as well. The real challenge with this industry is because of too many moving parties, too many moving players there. So there's no set standard as to what we should do in order to eliminate this cyber threat from our chain. So there is a real need of adhering to certain standard, and that's where the importance of having a good security posture understanding plays a very vital role. How are you gonna govern your risks around your cyber, cyber attacks, and how quickly you can recover from those, sort of issues that breaches that have happened. So these are, kind of fundamental things which now businesses have to make sure that they are having clear initiative, very, structured plan to address that. But there is another challenge also we are talking about here. Now we are talking about cyber, security risks. Is the world ready? Is this industry ready to be on top of these risks? Do they exactly know what they have to do? How to make sure that they are on top of all their governance risks and compliance? So that's where, the real need of understanding your security risks, adhering to certain standards, is something which is going to be very fundamentally required by this industry. And that's where, there are quite a good, companies out there or businesses out there who are actually, working towards making that knowledge available to supply chain businesses. So they are basically doing that job of empowerment to these businesses to make them educate as to what your risks are, how well you can, manage your risks, and what things you need to make sure that you are on top of them. They just need to see one thing: are they red, amber, or green on their risks? Now, there could be a risk category of thousand, let's say there are 1,000 risks that can be perceived. But categorically, are we good with those risks? Nobody can be 100% secure. In this time and age, we all know. But it's just that how well you have placed yourself.
Yeah, and this is the supply chain as well. But I think organizations need eyes from outside, because they are so used to maybe doing something as a process that they can't see that there's another way which is better. So also having that person or organization to come in and look at your process to make it more efficient. Ashok, there's a question in the chat. Ashok, can you explain more on how to make data available much faster, easier using Smartsheet?
Definitely. Thanks for that question. It's a very valid question and very contextual as well. Now, one of the key thing is most of the supply chains, I'll answer this question from the age we are living in perspective. The short answer is technologically, we can integrate any ERP systems which are available at your disposal with Smartsheet. It happens very quickly. It can give you real, seamless, live resolution about information. Very actionable, number one. And a little explanatory answer around that is, we are coming from an age of Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0. Now, if you really ask me, these are big words, but if I have to quickly define how they are different and similar. So Industry 4.0 does what Industry 3.0 did not do. What the Industry 3.0 did not do, they digitalized a lot of things. ERPs were set up, but they also left so many gaps which needs to be addressed during Industry 4.0. Sorry about that. Now, Industry 3.0 lasted for several years, or maybe 2 decades, I would say. Maybe 3 decades, I would say. But Industry 4.0, you will not have this luxury of 3 decades or 2 decades. It will be a couple of years on. But does it mean that can we move on to Industry 4. From 4.0 to Industry 5.0? Yes, the world will quickly move, but who will be left behind will have not an opportunity to come back.
Yeah,
that's the fundamental rationale behind it. That's the fundamental of service excellence at the moment. Realize the potential, the need for Industry 4.0, where you're essentially talking about resolutions which have no human intervention whatsoever. No human intervention of passing on data. If I have a question about what happened to that particular order yesterday, that should not be any question anymore.
Correct. So yeah, it is. And Smartsheet as an open API, we have so many integrations and also case studies where I know, Ashok, you've used a number of case studies with your customers to set a benchmark can be done. And having examples of organizations that have implemented the change and have become more efficient is always assuring to the customer or the organization that needs that change.
Definitely. And just to add a point, very important point, one of my big leading customer in this part of the world is speculating. The borders have closed. You don't have new staff members flying into country. You don't have workforce anymore at your luxury. The pressures inside the companies on the existing staff is increasing, and it's basically gone beyond imagination now. What's happening is they're speculating to onboard a customer. When you get a new customer onboarded in a 3PL environment, what they've started doing is using bots. The bots, which are intelligent robots, which are basically supplementing human efforts on your computer. And essentially, the good news is you don't need an HR department to hire them. So your next human resources department will be your IT department. That's a fundamental change you will see in the next few months or few weeks from now. That's a big request to most of the leaders in this segment to lead that change happening, so that the second layer of companies, in terms of who adopt the change from the leading companies, will get benefited faster. So your action at the moment will actually change the whole industry.
Yeah.
Just because you have taken first step.
And when talking to organizations, are they understanding the need for change? And if they're not, what's the pushback? And this is to the panel, like Pete, Pradeep, like, do organizations in supply chain understand that they need to go digital transformation and automation?
Yeah, I think it really is. The pandemic's a cliff event, right? Is that this takes what was already happening at a natural pace and accelerates it. So to Ashok's point earlier, this is existential. You're either going to deal with this and you're going to deal with it well, or you won't be around to deal with it and someone else will deal with it. And I think it's been a really, that's where I see the opportunity part here, right? You're taking what would have taken years maybe in the marketplace to happen in natural selection, and you're doing it in a matter of weeks and months to go, we have to make fundamental changes in the way we do things today. They can't have this long-term view of things that have huge expenses, and we have to get close to the data. We have to get close to the people. We have to be able to pivot and be resilient so that we can deal with whatever comes next, and to be able to change and to be things that are different. And I think you're going to see that not only in companies, you're going to see that in countries, and you're going to see the people who thrive in the workplace are going to be able to adapt and do the same thing. You know, this is the gig economy thought, right?
Exactly. And I love your point that maybe it's not just organizations, it's countries, it's, regions like Sydney at the moment in, serious lockdown. But then there's also, the homeschooling. Schools had to adapt to like digital transformation really quickly. And yeah, like it's not when this is over, it's what's next, and let's be prepared.
No, it is.
Definitely.
And I think just to add a point here around the pushback thing, Michelle, that you just mentioned, and I think yes, my observation do resonate with this pushback and the reasoning, that I have experienced with my sort of peers who I've been in discussion with, is that when the supply chain businesses are in need, they clearly know that there are gaps, because they can clearly see their KPIs are still not green. So that's a clear indicator that yes, they have the issue. It's just that how we can address these issues and how we can get the surety that by doing certain things, it's gonna turn green. So what's happening is because there is a clear gap in terms of resonating or empathizing with what business really needs, from the outside market. So what's happening is the value realization is something for the businesses that is sticking around, that how quickly we can get the value out of whatever investments are we doing. Is it really an investment, or is it really something for good for ourselves? And is it something that can be paid by its own self, the value that the certain strategy changes would be producing on the table? So that's the real sort of experience that I had while in discussion with a lot of other peers in the supply chain industry. And yeah, so I just thought I'll share some sort of market dynamics as well. But the good news is, having a curated strategy there, having a clear clearly defined goals as to where the business thinks they want to head towards, that's a fundamental starting point. And having this particular goal in mind, businesses can achieve the outcomes they are after. And that's actually not a rocket science. It's just that there's a deliberate thinking required there, stepping back, understanding what the real challenges they want to address first, and that's where the journey begins.
Yeah, exactly. And Pete, you're working across the globe. Do you see some countries embracing more than others, or trends in different regions?
Yeah, absolutely. So you see some countries that are able to really seize the opportunity today. Our friends in Singapore with their vaccination rates, in order to try and get their economy up, take advantage of the fact that, obviously there's a humanitarian piece there first and foremost. They want to save as many lives and really impact people's lives in a great way. But from an economic space too, to be able to get back to business as quickly as possible, to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are in the marketplace today, and to be able to kind of orient to a new world where, what we see again and again is frameworks, right? That can take the same thing and make it do lots of different things. And that's where I see the value of something like Smartsheet, where when I use it every day, I use it as that rolled up view that I can change dashboards, I can change reports, I can give all the stakeholders everything they need. And again, in a connected and collaborative way, it's hard for me to have a meeting across like 8 time zones. Someone is going to be inconvenienced highly. So being able to give real-time visibility to folks to go, look, you have the program dashboard. You can literally see the entire global view of everything that's happening in us as an organization. And for our customers, and some of our customers have hundreds of thousands of employees, and we manage enormous projects for them. And yet they can look at a program and they can see red, yellow, green. And if they need to, they can just keep drilling down in the same data set. It's not different data. It's not got to go through 4 layers of interpretation. No, it's down to the same data to go, here's the problem right here. And as much as possible, those are also leading indicators and not lagging, because like Ashok said, we don't have time to react because someone else is going to be in the space before us. They're going to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's where we're really trying to help our customers to go, this is a great opportunity for you to remake yourself in a different image. The world has changed. It's very unfortunate and it's very sad in a lot of ways. But this is how each successive society is built. It's kind of built on the rubble of what was here before. And we keep moving forward. And if you can adapt that kind of change mentality and resilience to that, I think there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity available to you.
Yeah, and it's kind of reimagine the future, but it's like you need to reinvent yourselves to adapt to the future.
You do. And the great news is that you have the pen in your hand to write the story. Because this isn't the kind of thing that you've got to have $10 million in the bank and have a PhD from Harvard. You don't. And that's why we just really love that whole concept of bias to action. Just get going. Do something. I think it was Bill Gates that said once that there's only 3 things it takes to change the world. Do something, learn from it, do it again. And that's just a great view of a lot of the tools that we use today, and just move.
Exactly. So we're coming up to our session. Ashok, did you want to give an overview and a summary to help the people on the call? And also this is being recorded, so we'll be sharing this out to the wider community.
Yep, sure, definitely. I would love to do so. And I think there's so much have been discussed in last several minutes, that the need for the change, the factors which are externally affecting and driving these change actions, and the hurdles to achieve that change have been so well connected now. The thought process has been so clear that one thing I can clearly see, if this session is listened carefully and has enough actions for you tomorrow, right? Tomorrow itself. You don't have to have a big project plan in place. Just get started. Get started, get stuck, get going. Keep going there. That's one way of doing it. Another good news I want to add for the people who are cost conscious. Okay, what is the benefit? They want benefit right from the day one itself. So I'm a big fan of putting things in numbers. So the clear benefit of driving service excellence, perceiving the right existential threat around you, and taking a bias towards action and using the tools which we have spoken about, Smartsheet, integrations, data, take away the lag of reporting, be ready for every meeting through your dashboards, have a TV in office, all this put together, a clear benefit, you are moving towards service excellence, and every initiative will pay for itself. Your end cost of entry into this, any reimagination part can be lowered down so low that you can do it right next week itself. You don't need a separate budget for that. Just spare some pocket money from your budget and get going. And then use that same pocket money, feed into next one. Use that another pocket money, use in next third one. So keep going that way, keep the ball rolling. That's how you bias towards action. Because one of the clear things which stops action is money. Or not just money as in money as in what is my ROI on it. So you have an opportunity to build an ROI. That's exactly where the tools and softwares and SaaS products like Smartsheet helps. It makes it so easier for people to enter into the segment of this world, because okay, the entry cost is so much, takes away one more less thing to worry about, basically. That's one thing. Second thing is, what's an opportunity out there? If I have to put a number there, you have a clear opportunity at the moment. Move towards service excellence by doing all that. Plus you can add your own elements as well, tailored to fit your needs. And the clear benefit is the cost footprint what you got at the moment within your supply chain logistics sector business can be halved, even during the pandemic. Because one of the clear things is stopping you achieve your financial cost reduction of operating margin goals is collaboration and visibility. Once you have that in a reimagined way, you will be on the track of achieving those goals again. I know a lot of people have lost workforce because of the cost pressures. That's exactly where I talk about bots. Bots will be your workforce now. So you don't have to hire anyone. Because there are no people out there who you can hire them and train them tomorrow. Who will be training them? There is no one in office to train them anymore. Everyone is working so remote.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the fact that a Smartsheet in APAC in Sydney reopened last February, and we're at 80 plus staff and onboarding like online. We had to adapt really quickly to, accelerate growth, but actually have the support of new members. And then when you become more efficient, it's not getting rid of headcount, but making that headcount actually work and do things that are benefit to the organization.
Definitely, very important point.
Absolutely.
Go, Pete.
I was just going to say that's absolutely it, right? We want to move everybody towards more meaningful work. So when we counsel customers on this isn't about, how can I get by with 3 people instead of 5? It's how can we have more meaningful work for the 5? Because you have so much growth that you need to be able to fuel it somehow from a workforce perspective. And that, I think, is really the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add one more point here. I think right after this discussion, I think one key takeaway that people from this webinar can take is they need to stick to a plan and find out what goal they want to work towards. So set a goal, have strategies in place, think from externally and internally both, and just keep going. Just break your problem into bits and pieces and start addressing them. So there's no failure. It's always a learning, as we all have, basically seen, heard, read quite a lot of times. Now it's a time, and it's not like people are not doing it, businesses are not doing it. It's just that there's a fear of failure as well, and the cost that it takes for that failure. So that's a reason we say that set goals. Now that goal doesn't need to be a goal to be achieved in 3 years. Set a goal for next 1 month, next 2 months. So let's start small steps. And once you have quick wins, easy quick wins, you'll realize that, it's actually, it's a good journey.
Yeah.
And then start addressing those issues, knocking away from your way.
Yeah, exactly. And having those targets and that thinking, did it work? Yes, persevere. It didn't work, pivot. Let's try something new. So I just want to thank you to the panelists, and once again, thank you to the attendees. The insights from Pradeep, Pete and Ashok have been amazing. And those that have submitted questions or have questions after this panel discussion, please reach out, but we'll be reaching out personally to say thank you as well.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Michelle.
Thanks,
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, team.
Thanks, team. Goodbye.
Bye.